I have a real problem with some of these new Republicans that are coming out. And I wrote this piece, and it's centered around one guy who's running for a state house seat, District 61 in my state of Texas. And it doesn't matter if it's a state house seat in Texas. You need to watch what's happening in your states, because I started looking at a number of other Republicans running, and I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to write a piece secondary to this, because it feels like when Republicans are doing really well, when they're on with messaging, when you can really see, when the populace can really see a difference between what Democrats get you and what Republicans or people who are liberty-minded. Most people who vote for, not everybody who votes for Republicans are Republicans. I don't consider myself like a registered Republican Party person. I vote for the person who's going to leave me alone the most. And that tends to be Republicans. So I typically vote Republican. I get real weird about having to pledge allegiance or fealty to parties, because I get real weird about joining stuff. And I've noticed after I wrote this piece about Frederick Frazer that's up on my Substack, I was looking around at a number of these other state races, and there are a lot of some of these soft Republicans. More so than I've ever seen. And what gets me is they all go out and they're like, yeah, we're MAGA. We're MAGA Republicans. MAGA, 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 MAGA. And I think in a time when Republicans, like I said, are doing well and people can see clearly a difference between what liberty gets you and what it doesn't get you, that's the time when a lot of these fakers come out and they think that, oh, well, there's, the pendulum is swinging towards Republicans. So this is the time for me to run. All I got to do is just say that I'm MAGA, and that's going to do it. And that's not necessarily the case. And I see it in a number of these state races too. Some of these races that really the only people that you can hold responsible for paying attention to this are the people who live in that district, in that state. And so, for instance, like this Frederick Frazer guy, I don't know anything about him. He might be a nice person. I don't know. When you're a politician, I just look at who you are as a politician. Maybe he's real nice and he loves puppies and pets kittens. I don't know. I don't know anything about this guy. All I know is his record. And as someone who has listened for the past 15 years to Democrats telling me they're coming to take my guns and calling me a gun whore and saying that I'm for the mass murder of everybody just because I simply believe in the Second Amendment, I get a little sensitive to stuff like this. I'm not a bouncer for conservatism. I'm not a bouncer for the Republican Party. I'm not a bouncer for individual liberty. But I sure as hell am going to point out when someone doesn't line up with a constitutional natural right. And that's what this is. I always hate it when people try to deflect from pointing out a candidate's record by saying, well, you want purity. This has nothing to do with purity. If you're running as a Republican and you can't even get on board with basic natural constitutional rights unabridged, that's a problem. And I don't know why you have an R after your name. So this guy, like I said, this is one of my favorite sayings is, it's not show friends, it's show business, right? It's the same thing. Same way we got to approach it when you're voting and when you're measuring and evaluating politicians. So this guy, and I don't know Paul Chabot either. I think he's been on the show once over one issue. I have never met the guy. I have never corresponded with him privately, ever. So I don't have a dog in this race. All I know is that Frazer, he's running in House District 61 in a runoff against Paul Chabot, and they're both Republicans. And Frazer opposes every form of carry. He doesn't like open carry because he says, quote, there's no training. They're ceiling shooters. And he said there's zero training and zero background check. He called people who open carry ceiling shooters. And I'm like, well, first off, what do you mean there's no background check? When you purchase a gun, there's a background check. And furthermore, there's no statistics that support the argument that open carry in states actually corresponds with an increase in crime. I did 2 books on this. I have talked to criminal researchers. I have pored over crime reports state by state because sometimes DGU is reported differently depending on what the requirements are. He also said, and this is the thing I really oppose, he said that he goes, for example, it's legal for someone to carry a gun on a crowded city street, but it may not be the smartest or most common sense choice. It could incite fear. Most of Texas carries every day in the crowded street, but most people don't know it because most gun owners choose to carry concealed. It is a right. It's not a privilege that's determined by some soft on rights politician. We were promised that if Texas had open carry, constitutional carry, that Texas was going to turn into OK Corral. But you know what? That never happened. Just like with the 25 states in the union that have passed constitutional carry, that implemented it, or the other states that have open carry, none of that ever happened. And by the way, if you want the receipts on that, the hard data, I provided it helpfully for you in the link on my newsletter on Substack Chapter and Verse, where I keep all of my receipts. He's gaslighting about ceiling shooters. Law-abiding gun owners are not the problem. Repeat offenders and restorative justice together is the real problem. Now, he also said this. He did a presser with hot-tempered anti-gun guy Art Acevedo, who told me he was watching me, which that was the whole thing. Frazer said, a person walking around with a gun that we're not able to come in contact with and vet the process of why he's carrying a gun, that puts us in a position of not being able to do our job. I provided for you a link to show you that Texas police are still stopping prohibited possessors and doing just that without violating their constitutional rights. And it should be noted that Pennsylvania's Supreme Court already determined that it's unconstitutional for police to just simply, just because you have a firearm, that does not give someone the right to law enforcement, the right to stop you and make you prove that you are legally able to carry a firearm. I am not into that. That is not something to be able to, you have a legal to own object. And if you can't determine whether or not someone looks like a threat, if they're holding it threateningly and they're not, and they're just carrying, then that's a problem. And maybe you should seek a different profession. And the constitutional carry law, by the way, I should note in Texas, created stiffer penalties for prohibited persons. No, police cannot stop and question you over absolutely nothing. And he's sending out these very misleading mailers. He says that he has, and now full disclosure, I do not work with the NRA. I worked with him a few years ago. He says he's got an AQ rating. That means you get an A on the questionnaire, and that's what is used in absence of a voting record on guns. Except they list him as a question mark. He doesn't even have any rating with them, and he's sending out these mailers saying that he has an AQ rating, which he doesn't. And I've asked this campaign to clarify their claim, and they absolutely refuse to respond to me. We don't need like a Dr. Oz in Texas, okay? We don't need anything like that. Some of the endorsements that he's got, I question it. I don't know why Trump endorsed this guy. Again, I've said the weakest spot that Trump has are the personnel, the people that he has with him who are telling him who to endorse. I think that's where I think his weak spot is. He can't be everywhere all the time. Now, this other guy, another quick thing on this too. So I was digging around in his records, and I looked at his votes for city council. I looked at his registered complaints against like campus carry and concealed carry or constitutional carry, all this stuff. He apparently also repeatedly supported raising taxes in his town where he served on city council. He opposed the Taxpayer Transparency Act of 2019 to help curb our soaring property taxes. And these are all linked with receipts, literal, actual, the registration of the vote and the support, in case you had questions. He also pushed to keep non-essential residents home and businesses closed during the coronavirus panic and lockdown, except for golf courses. Those he supported opening. How many Texans lost, and people elsewhere around the country, lost their livelihoods because of these draconian lockdown measures like the ones that Frederick Frazer voted for and publicly supported? Now, this is what's funny. So back in March, there was a call that came in that someone was impersonating a code compliance officer and demanding that the local Walmart pull Paul Chabot signs that they had out. And apparently it was the way that the reports read, it was Frederick Frazer that was accused of this. He was accused. I don't know. I think they're still investigating it. I don't know, but I just think the whole story is funny. Because this sounds like something that you would see like on Kids in the Hall or something. They said that Frazer was accused of vandalizing Chabot signs, and the Department of Public Safety confirmed to one of the NBC affiliates here, WFAA, that they did investigate the District 61 candidate because he apparently had told Walmart, this is what the reports were, that he was a code compliance officer and they needed to pull the Chabot signs, which it wasn't in violation of any kind of code. Now, the conservative Texas scorecard calls it Signgate. It's very funny. After the failures of Eric Greitens in Missouri and I have that listed. He did not support the Second Amendment Preservation Act in Missouri. He used verbatim Bloomberg's mom's demand language to say that it makes it more dangerous for police. And it's basically a 10th Amendment affirmation of Missourians' gun rights. He also made the capital a gun-free zone when he was inaugurated as governor, and he wouldn't support constitutional carry and a whole bunch of other stuff. After his failures and after the whole Dr. Oz gun control in Pennsylvania, 3 has made a crowd for me of this, soft on the second Republicans with the addition of Frazer. So I don't know what's happening with the GOP. I don't know what's happening with some of these people. And, for everything that's going on with Democrats, their party, they're socialists. They're far left. This is not the time when we have momentum of message on our side. And I know it feels tough, but people are waking up all over. And this is not the time to start watering down our messaging with this. And just because someone's a cop or someone was, served in the military, that does not mean that they're conservative. It does not mean that they have your rights. Like I've always said, I'm all for backing the blue. I back the blue on constitutional issues. I do not back the blue when they act as agents of state and seek to undermine my rights. And nor should you be gaslit into any kind of emotional appeal like that either. So we sit here and we talk a lot about Democrats, but Republicans, you need to be gatekeepers in your own area. Conservatives, for some of these people coming up, do not trust people to tell you who to vote for. Honestly. And look, I've known Trump for over a decade. He's always been kind. And I love so much of what he's done. But I think his weakest spot are some of these people that he's got around him telling him who to endorse. That is an industry just like anything else. People get money off of that. You need to know it. It's a whole cottage industry. There are entire firms that are built and they get money and they get paid based off of this, securing endorsements. So know this. Trust your gut and look at their record.